In another disturbing indicator of the speed of climate change, new BBC Global research reveals a significant increase in the number of days temperatures around the world are hitting 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, the world is seeing far more extreme heat. Since the 1980s, the number of 50-degree days has tripled. Back then, there were 8 days a year on average. In the past decade, there have been 26. Temperatures of 50 degrees Celsius happen most often in the Middle East and Gulf, but they are now being recorded in more areas of the world than before. North Africa has seen them with increasing frequency. Here we can see what happened this year. Canada, for example, hit 49 degrees, Italy 48. Well, today we are launching a series called Life at 50 degrees Celsius, exploring the impact of extreme heat. First stop Nigeria, where climate change has destroyed much of the fertile land. The country's oil production has also added to the problem, as Peter Okwoche now reports.
This is my mom. She's going to the flare now. You see the fire.
Under the scorching sun and in front of an open gas flare in Nigeria's oil-rich south, Joy risks her life to support her family. Temperatures here reach boiling levels. But despite the risks, Joy uses the heat to speed up drying time for her tapioca sweet puddings.
The reason I have short hair is because if I grow my hair long, it could burn my head if the flare shifts its direction and explodes.
The use of fossil fuels worldwide has had a devastating impact on Nigeria's climate. The country suffers from severe droughts in the north and flash floods in the south.
When I was a kid, the rain is not like this, the weather is not like this. So I think that the life is not getting end.
But Nigeria is also a major producer of oil with a particular emission problem.
This is how they flare the gas. The inhabitants of this land are suffering with the abject poverty.
Flaring is the process of burning the natural gas that is released when oil is extracted from the ground. The process is a large source of greenhouse gases and a major contributor to climate change in Nigeria. It is also illegal in the country. Yet, about 2 million Nigerians live within 4 kilometers of a gas flare, including Joy and her children.
This is my children.
For Joy, working around the gas flare is one way of making ends meet.
It's bad for our health, but we say to hell with the consequences. We need to support our families.
Joy and her children have been working extra hard for 4 days straight. They are processing the tapioca to help her family pay for the funeral of her mother.
When I come in Agbara, I have no work, no job. I see some women working this tapioca. Then I ask them, they should let me.
Although they need the money, Joy's family still wants gas flares to stop.
In my view, the government should lead efforts to end gas flaring in the oil industry, and hopefully that will significantly reduce the heat wave and associated health hazards.
Nigeria's economic development is highly dependent on oil revenue. Yet, the industry is making it one of Africa's largest emitters of greenhouse gases. And until the government fulfills its promise to end gas flaring by 2030, the country's landscape and the lives and livelihoods of millions like Joy remain at risk. Peter Okwoche, BBC News.
Well, Leslie Hughes is spokesperson for Australia's Climate Council, professor at Macquarie University and Australia's former Federal Climate Commissioner. I spoke to her earlier and I asked her what she made of the findings.
I mean, it is entirely consistent with what we know about global temperatures accelerating. And as average temperatures accelerate, what we expect is to get more extreme temperatures. So from that perspective, this report is entirely consistent with the last IPCC report and really with what the last 3 decades of research has been telling us.
And what are the main drivers here?
Well, the main driver, as the report said, was the burning of fossil fuels, not just in Nigeria, but everywhere in the world. You know, we now have nearly 50% more CO2 in the atmosphere than we did in pre-industrial times. That rise continues, and it's heating up the planet.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the world seems to know so much about climate change, extreme weather, say in Europe, in Russia and elsewhere, but Africa seems particularly underreported. Why is that?
Well, I suppose the level of development means that there's a lower level of data collection for climate, a lower level of education about climate, and just a general lower level of scientific activity. But that doesn't mean they're any less affected. And of course, in many instances, those developing countries and the populations in them are some of the most vulnerable people in the world to the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, and the impact on human health and indeed on global society, because presumably this will feed into migration, drought, famine.
Absolutely. So the last Oxfam report indicated that about 20 million people every year are now displaced by climate-related events. And many of those people, of course, are displaced in continents like Africa. So it's those people that are suffering the most from the impacts of climate change, even though at an individual and even at a country level, they are contributing to the problem the least.
Yeah, I think it's known, isn't it, as fire weather, these extreme temperatures, but also flooding as well. How confident are you that this can be turned around in the next 50 years?
Well, the IPCC report released a few weeks ago had one little silver lining, which is that it made it very clear that if we reduce emissions rapidly and deeply within the next few years, and certainly before 2030, we have a chance of levelling off global temperatures by the middle of the century, so in 20 to 30 years' time, in the lifetimes of most of us, and to then move towards a safer operating space for humanity. But equally, it was clear that if we don't get emissions under control this decade, global temperatures will continue to rise, these extremes will continue to become eventually something that neither humans nor any other species on the planet can adapt to.